Hi everyone, I'm Stan Mallard. Welcome to Paranormal Yakker. My guest on today's show is Chris Berryman, an extraordinary man who has channeled extraterrestrials and written about them in his book, The N1 Sessions, Seasonal Reflections from the Outer Dimensions of Light. In the book, which I'll be talking with Chris about, he shares not only his alien experiences and insights, but also explores questions about who they are, where they came from, their technology, and their interest in humanity. Chris Berryman, welcome to Paranormal Yakker.
Well, thank you so much, Stan. Thanks for having me.
You, Chris, are a director, actor, and producer at the prestigious Detroit Theater Collective. As I'm sure you know, the theater is collaborative venture. Doing that with alien beings in the writing of the N1 sessions had to be one heck of an undertaking. What are the roots of your collaboration with them?
The collaboration started at the beginning of the pandemic, and I didn't know what was happening at first, but it just kept going on, and I was kind of bombarded with sensory experiences, visions, and pictures that would be particularly when I went before, right before when I closed my eyes at night, I could see these images very clearly. I would also see them throughout the day. Sometimes geometry, some of them were portals, some of them were flying vehicles, some of it was machinery that I had never really seen before, and light bursts, things like that. And I eventually had an experience where it felt as if my energy, my awareness was being lifted up. I was laying in bed, the lights were on, and I could suddenly see visions of, it felt like the inside of some kind of spacecraft. And there was a window, there was a desert scene, there was a control panel, there were hands. And it was a positive experience. I felt like I was getting like four energy healing sessions at the same time in deep meditation. And it had a real high vibe to it, a warm feeling. So that happened. And then it just kept, these visions kept appearing. So I finally, with the encouragement of a teacher that I have, I eventually just confronted the vision, say, what is it that you want? Whatever the source of this experience it is, what do you want? And then I was introduced to a being named N1 and a collective that I've come to know as the Orion Contingent. And that was the inspiration for my first book, which is a children's sci-fi illustrated work called Flying Saucer Visions, and also for this upcoming book, which is nonfiction essays on consciousness called the N1 Sessions.
Different types of alien species inhabit our vast galaxy. Which alien races, Chris, did you communicate with? And did any of them ever tell you why you were chosen to tell their story, their message to the inhabitants of our planet?
I experienced these beings in as energy bodies. I have never had a face-to-face physical experience with them, but I had a prolonged experience, first seeing these visions and then sort of using a technique of going into trance and with some protection methods and things like that to communicate more deeply with them. And the beings that I saw, some of them were human. I guess you'd say galactic human, very tall beings, glowing skin. And some of them were difficult to describe. In the book, there's an image of one of them, sort of like a larger head, not quite like the being behind you, but more of an elonged face, more of a very, very thin body. And some of them were reptilian. And so I came to understand that this is a mixture of beings, mostly from Orion and Sirius, but actually from all over the place, all over I guess you'd say, our galaxy.
You write, Chris, that for thousands of years, planet Earth was quarantined spiritually and energetically from other galactic civilizations. What was the reason we were quarantined, and why is that quarantine now being lifted?
The reason which I received, which I came to understand in that is in the N1 sessions, is that there are light beings who came to this planet in different forms a long time ago and tried to sort of lift our civilization to a new place. And then there was another group of beings, mixed, more than one group, who came here who perhaps didn't have the most altruistic intentions. And because of that, maybe that happened. I've come to realize I can't put money on this or anything, that maybe that happened during the Bronze Age when that onslaught happened from not so well intentioned beings. And from that, there was a quarantine that was put on from different star races in the universe, sort of as a protection, and it just as a because they weren't able to we weren't able to communicate as easily with those original star ancestors, that we had to, I guess it had to be, the whole situation of this planet had to be handled with velvet glove, so to speak. And that's pretty much the depth of my understanding right now. It goes into this in the book a little bit. Galactic history isn't really the focus. The focus is more the now.
One of N1's central messages given to you to give to us Earthlings is that being at peace with yourself is the true start. Did they tell you why that message is an important one for us to heed?
That is a big message in the N1 sessions, and that self acceptance of how I am right now, that opens up sort of a portal within our own being of acceptance, of expressing that acceptance and feeling connected to everyone else on the planet, every living thing. And with that as the starting place, we're then able to connect with both the planet and the forces of the galactic forces, I guess you'd say, the cosmic forces, the higher forces that want to communicate with us. But that self acceptance, that healing, there might be self healing that's needed connected with that. There might be a need to process past traumas that might be connected with that. But that priority of taking care of ourselves first, because we can try to control the other people and events in the world, but the first thing that we have control over is our own being. And starting with that, healing that, opening that up is something that's described in detail in the N1 sessions.
In your book, Chris, it is suggested that we Earth humans share genetic ancestry with off-world beings. Could you elaborate on that?
I was told during these sessions that this collective, they feel a kinship with us because if we would trace their creators, the beings who seeded them back, and then you would trace our creators, there might be a longer lineage for us, but it's the same source in the universe of creator beings who came to take light and intention and magnify it and create other beings and to create worlds, really different worlds. And of course, there's many different flavors and many different dimensions and different beings living in those dimensions.
The agenda of alien beings who visited us and still are visiting our planet varies greatly, much of it negative, and ranges from them invading us and stealing our natural resources to enslaving us. Happily, that is far from what you were told by N1 transmissions. What, Chris, is the real extraterrestrial agenda?
I can't speak for all influences in the universe, but during these sessions, what came through was that if there are malevolent forces there are coming more and more of a minority. And that some of the beings who maybe at one time didn't have the best intentions, many of them have sort of converted or become enlightened. And then the star races, the beings who always have had good intentions, have grown as well and have evolved as well. So there is a cosmic family waiting for us. And if there are forces that don't have the best intentions, that we can now, us as a species, we are now ready to take this on ourselves, maybe perhaps with some help, but to take this on ourselves, become aware of a bigger picture of life here, out there, all of it, and just take ownership of it.
When it comes to the sky phenomena, anyone clarified what percentage of UFO UAP sightings are human-made and what percentage can be attributed to crafts that are authentic manifestations whose origins stem from extraterrestrial civilizations? What, Chris, are those percentages?
There's a chapter in the N1 sessions called The Other 73%. So what I was received during that session is that 27% is terrestrial, whether it's military experiments, defense experiments, other Earth projects that maybe we know what it is and maybe we don't. That's 27%. But the other 73 comes from different worlds. Some of it is 3D and some of it might be holographic. So there are, and that's, from several different sources in the universe. So the N1 sessions explores that, the nuances of that, and the different things that have been happening, and maybe it gives some clues about what could happen next.
Cosmic ecology, healing the planet to heal the galaxy, are amongst the transmissions in the book, and it's made clear that environmental restoration of our planet is linked to galactic harmony. How do they suggest we go about doing that?
There's many suggestions, starting with, again, that ownership of taking control, taking of ourselves, owning our any violent tendencies we have on the inside, and then realizing that this is all connected to the suffering, the violence, the oppression that comes from nations, from other oppressive forces going on in the world right now, which there's evidence of the brink of World War III. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of suffering going on right now. So taking ownership of that and realizing that we're all interconnected in our consciousness, in our intentions. And it goes into many different things, to being aware of the different dimensions of reality, being aware of societal tendencies such as cults, how there are groups. This is just a natural phenomena that groups during this age, there's different groups with different ideas that are going to come together. And some of them might have good intentions, some of them might not. But so you can't dismiss them immediately, even though they might seem weird to you or different than you, that there are perhaps going to be more and more of this going on. And just to tune back into the planet and all the power zones on the planet, to respect these areas more, to respect the oceans more. And there's many things that the book suggests. I guess that's just a little tasting, but sort of like starting within, moving out to other people, and moving out to this place that we live in.
A striking idea in the sessions is that the human body itself is a stargate, a portal, a living multi-dimensional instrument. How is that achieved?
That speaks to some of these abilities that we have, that some of us have started to tap into, and that everyone has the potential to tap into if they choose to. Sort of, this is things like there's a big movement of somatic awareness right now, somatic therapies, which basically just means body mind, and developing our ESP, developing our intuition and our psychic ability more, as well as developing our minds, studying. I'm a practical Capricorn, so I like step-by-step things, but that's kind of what it feels like it would be to me, but maybe we'll be surprised. I would say this is going to be a very exciting, starting now, the next 300 years on planet Earth. So that's something to get excited about, I think.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yakker want to buy the N1 Sessions, Seasonal Reflections from the Outer Dimensions of Light, how, Chris, can they do that?
It's available on Amazon. Whatever, I'm in France right now, but it's available on all the different versions of Amazon out there in the world, and Barnes and Noble's website as well, and also many websites where books are sold. So it's if you just do a search, it should come up pretty easily.
Chris Berryman, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yakker. It's been great yakking with you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, and thank you for having me, Stan. This was a lot of fun.
Hi, everyone. This is Stan Mallard of Paranormal Yakker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. So that you don't miss any upcoming shows, be sure to subscribe to my free YouTube channel. To do that, just press the subscribe button on your screen.